Well, let's take you live straight away to Moscow, where, as you can see, this is India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who is addressing delegates at a meeting taking place in the Russian capital, where he is the guest of President Vladimir Putin. This is Modi's first foreign visit after he won a rare third term in office in India's elections. Our business correspondent based in India is Arunoday Mukharji and explains why trade will top their agenda at these bilateral talks.
At a time when the West is boycotting Russia, India is not. Bilateral trade between the two countries nearly doubled last year, touching around $65 billion, primarily driven by the fact that India has been buying deeply discounted Russian oil, a fact that New Delhi has defended, citing its own energy needs. But New Delhi has also acknowledged the fact that this trade relationship is deeply skewed in favor of Russia, because out of all the exports and trade, India's exports stood at only about $4 billion. It is this trade imbalance that Prime Minister Modi hopes to correct by this visit, and India is hoping to explore more opportunities of exporting other items ranging from pharmaceuticals to information technology and even agriculture. Now, India, just to put in context, has had age-old ties with Russia, which date back to even before the Cold War period. Russia has also for long been one of India's primary defense suppliers as well. It is a relationship that India has refused to pivot away from, despite criticism from the West. In fact, repeatedly, India has not openly criticized Russia for its war in Ukraine. It has also abstained from voting against Russia at the UN as well. So in this visit, we are also likely to see New Delhi again trying to walk the tightrope. On the one hand, enhancing its ties with Russia, and on the other, also not antagonizing the West.
Well, in the meantime, the pressure is coming from the United States as it calls on Narendra Modi to emphasize Ukraine's territorial integrity in his meetings with Vladimir Putin. This as the NATO summit kicks off in Washington.
We would urge India, as we do any country when it engages with Russia, to make clear that any resolution to the conflict in Ukraine needs to be one that respects the UN Charter, that respects Ukraine's territorial integrity, Ukraine's sovereignty.
Well, for analysis, I talked to Chris Wiefer, who's founding partner at Macro Advisory. He's based in Russia. And I asked him if he believes Mr. Modi will address the issue of Ukraine.
Probably not, or not in a way that the US would like, say, not forcefully. He won't be critical of Russia. He will adopt a position that we've seen from, say, countries like Kazakhstan and others in Central Asia, where they do not specifically support Russia's actions in Ukraine. They do not recognize Russia's territorial claim on the territories, but they don't criticize either. They sidestep, and I would expect Prime Minister Modi will continue to sidestep and will not be as critical as the US would like.
I mean, we all understand why this relationship between Russia and India is so important. India is getting cheap fuel, which it needs. Its economy is growing fast, most populous in the world. Russia needs the business right now, most sanctioned country in the world. How concerned is the West about this relationship, do you think?
Well, I think in general, we certainly see growing concern in the West about the fact that Russia is able to do business with Asian countries, with Middle Eastern countries, and the business is growing and, of course, continues to fuel the Russian economy, and particularly, of course, adds money into the budget, which allows the government to fund the military-industrial complex. So over the last, say, since the start of this year, we have seen a change of tack to some extent, particularly by the US and maybe a lesser extent by Europe, where instead of looking for new areas to sanction, they've actually started to focus much more on tightening the enforcement of its existing sanctions. For example, threatening international banks, be they in India or Turkey or China, and threatening them with secondary sanctions from the US if they are found to be engaged in any sanctioned activity with Russia. And that's made a big difference this year. One of the issues that will be discussed today's meeting between Putin and Modi is not only how can trade expand, but also how can financial transactions continue against this backdrop of US Treasury threats, because we already know that Russia sells a lot of oil to India, earns a lot of money in rupees, but a lot of those rupees are still trapped in Indian banks. And it's becoming more difficult for Russia to get paid for the oil, to bring it back to fund the economy. And that's something that Putin is trying to resolve with India, with China, with Turkey, since the US Treasury sanctions got tougher from the beginning of this year.